updated refunding report on the sale of crossover refunding bonds to refinance the 2009 general obligation bond. The attached letter and report detail a correction in the initial savings projections report. The savings projection is less than anticipated, but still significant. Resolution 2015-026 is a revised triggering resolution restating a savings target for $100,000 prior to authorizing the sale of bonds. The attached letter and report from Mike Bubani. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. There's a bad joke I tell my wife that says I'm always right. It's just that sometimes I'm less right than others. This unfortunately is one of those times. So I'm here humbly. A few weeks back, the city received a savings report for potentially refinancing some bonds, utilizing a crossover advance refunding technique. And I think in the report at that time, I had laid out sort of the inefficiencies associated with that kind of refinancing. And that's still true today. None of that changes. However, when I had grabbed the schedule to compare the savings, I had grabbed one of the preliminary schedules that I put together. If any of you recall, whenever we do a new money bond issue, I'll do some projections and things like that. And then there's about a month that goes by to when we actually sell the bonds, and the final result can be different from those initial schedules. Well, I had grabbed one of those initial schedules which had higher coupon rate or interest rates than what the final ended up having. So when I looked at today's market compared to that old schedule, it made savings look much better. But your old bonds didn't have as high of an interest rate as what I showed you in that report a few weeks back. The report that you have in front of you correctly identifies the final payment schedule and does show significant savings, but it's a lot less than what you saw. It's about half of what you saw a few weeks back. I think we had $200,000 as our present value savings target before. Now we're looking at $100,000. I actually think we can do a little better than that. I ran it again today and was able to produce about $110,000 in present value savings. But the triggering resolution is at 100 just to be kind of safe. So the question is, what do you want to do? When you approved that resolution a few weeks back, you authorized me to work with the rating agency to get your rating updated and to proceed with this sale. If that sale was to not occur, and I think this risk was laid out in the initial letter, if that sale was to be unsuccessful, the city would have been stuck with a rating call, or excuse me, a rating fee. But in this instance, it wasn't that necessarily that the market had moved or anything. In this instance, the reason that saving can't be hit is because I used the wrong numbers in the initial report. So now the city's holding on to an invoice. In fact, you've already been invoiced. You haven't paid it yet. So your choices are, A, you could pass the new resolution with the real savings and move forward, or B, no thank you. In light of the error, we don't want to move forward. If that is the case, we pay the rating bill. Okay, we will not have you pay a fee or have a cost for my error. Okay, so only if you want to move forward would there be a cost to the city.
What is the cost? Anything set yet? Definite?
Well, the invoice is a little over $10,000, but S&P has a, if the bond issue was not issued, they only charge 75% of that, so it would be a little under $8,000. But that's really not the point. We're fully prepared to absorb that cost, and I wouldn't have you think twice about that. The question is $100,000? Had you known a few weeks back that the savings was $100,000, would you have still moved forward? If the answer is no, then say no tonight. And if the answer is yes, then say yes.
$100,000 is nothing to sneeze at, so I make the motion.
That's still a lot of interest.
Yeah, but.
That's over a period of.
Okay, hang on a second, Robert, on the motion.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do you see it changing in the next couple of years where it would be beneficial for us to hold off, or is this something that we can look at again in the future? Or?
The way to look at this is this way. Because this is a crossover advance refunding, you wouldn't enjoy any savings in your budget for the next 2 years. It's that third year and thereafter that you start saving about 10 grand a year. So what that means is for that 2 years, the money kind of sits on a shelf, kind of invested in itself, rolling around. Every month that goes by, that we get closer to the actual call date, so if rates would stay exactly the same as they are today, every month that goes by, this deal looks better. Okay? The question is, will rates stay the same? I don't know. They could go up, they could go down. I was contacted Cityof on an advanced refunding. We haven't even started to move forward on that. One of the potential underwriters involved in that deal had contacted me, not the same one I'm working here, a different one, and said, Mike, but rates are gonna go up in June. I said, how do you know? They could go down, all right? So I'm not gonna tell you doom and gloom, you have to do this now. It's really your risk tolerance. If you'd hate to give this up, move forward. If you think that rates might go up, but then they might come back down later, I don't have a crystal ball. Anybody who tells you they do is lying to you. It's kind of, the anecdote I use is when you're refinancing your mortgage, and they ask you what, do you wanna lock in today? And you think, well, our rate's gonna be better tomorrow, and they can never tell you. And so then you lock in and you hope. My advice is it's like when I got my mortgage settled, I just didn't look at rates again, because I didn't wanna know if I had locked in too soon or not.
So is this a savings on a number of loans that we saved on?
One bond issue,
One bond,
2009 bond.
that's all it is.
Yeah. At one time, I looked at including the 2011 bond issue, but there's a minimum percentage savings that you have to reach. It's 3%. And if the savings doesn't equal 3% of the refunded debt service, then by law, you cannot do an advanced refunding like this. So the 2009 works, the 2011 didn't, so that's why you never saw the 2011, I extracted it.
So does that affect our bond rating?
If I can go back then to your rating report, it was affirmed at A stable. A stable is a nice rate. It's not as good of a credit rating as what you had. At one point you were an A plus. And if you recall, I think it was with the 11, might have been the 9 or the 11 bonds, I can't remember what it was, but we had that deal rated and they knocked you down to an A. And the reason they knocked you down to an A is because you had spent so much out of your reserves for all the flooding damage you had taken on and waiting for FEMA to reimburse you. Our hope, actually, was that with all the FEMA money coming back in now, that we could hit back to that A plus, and yet we didn't. Why? Well, I found out after our call, Steve, that S&P had instituted, one of the big ratios for them is what's your general fund reserves at the end of the year versus what you spent. They'd like to see 50% or more. But the new tidbit they threw in there is despite that ratio or that percentage, they would like to see at least $500,000 in your general fund. And I think at the end of the year you were about 250 or so. I can't remember, Kathy, if you can confirm that, but it wasn't 500,000. So, the question is, do you raise taxes and try and build reserves to get to 500,000 to try and push back to that A plus? Well, the difference between A plus and an A rating, it looks significant in the paper, but it might make the difference of 5 to 10 basis points on an interest rate on a borrowing. So in actual real dollars, it doesn't add up too much. I would not advise a policy of just jamming money into the reserves simply for the pat on the back to say we're A plus. I don't think the benefit is worth what you have to go through to get there. And the reason they have this new $500,000 tidbit is think about these little teeny little towns that might have great ratios, but in the end, when you look at the actual dollars, it doesn't add up to very much. So that's why they started instituting the ratios along with a set dollar.